Okay, looks like we still have some folks coming in. Welcome, everybody. Or folks trying to come in, it seems. Um, uh, we're here in the Stacks working group called Stacks Governance Working Group called number 66. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys as always. And we can hop right in. We usually have some stand-ups. Welcome. I
It's
think you're
Aqua with a dot. Hello.
welcome, Aqua. Oh, welcome. Glad you're here. Um,
Thank you.
Yeah. These are open sessions, so you're in the right spot. It'd be beautiful to have your voice and any updates for us. Um, and this is the part that we're at actually, where we begin. We haven't started yet, but we usually begin with some stand-ups, some brief stand-ups from folks, letting us know what they've been up to. Some of the things that may be governance related or slightly governance related. Akva, I know you working closely with Haas and some of the tooling that we've been working on in terms of journeys and micro DAOs and right inside the Discord. So uh, I would, definitely include this as related to some of the things that we're excited about in governance working group. So it's a pleasure to have you, and you're welcome to give us a brief stand up. Uh, you know, as you'll see some of us do here. I can get us started off. Um, so the last couple of weeks we've been having ever growing, it seems like, advocates meetings weekly, more and more consistent folks. Very grateful for um, the flow that we've started to come into in terms of both meeting consistently, but also we're getting a nice flow in dialogue as well, a nice rhythm to our sense making or consensus that turns into implementations in the advocates structure and tooling. And so uh, it's been really surreal to just know that that's there every week. And it's something that can be fractaled out across the advocates with such a solid foundation. And what we've been focused on in the last couple of weeks has been exactly how do we have some static documentation for folks to plug into when trying to pick up the tooling we already have in channels like active issues and formal proposals, and apply a system design of the clan system design that we have built into the advocates. And we've been working together to make sure that this stuff is as clear as possible. A lot of gratitude to Ryder, ensuring the formatting and important language is coming through clear, corrected. And same with everybody here. Hero, a lot of folks in those sessions that are guiding exactly how we should go about this in terms of capturing testing um, uh, before integrating this particular system design on top of the tooling officially, right, and using it um, uh, very differently, right, than how we use the tooling right now. You see, I see Jude trying to come in here. Uh, and so, uh, welcome, Jude. I see maybe still getting some audio, but so we're very excited, to say the least, for uh, some of the first testing of this. Uh, I think the folks that are familiar with the tooling already are going to be the ones that can easily pick up the system design and apply it to the tooling. Maybe a little bit steeper learning curve for folks who've never used the tooling before, but I'm really grateful for the step-by-step rollout of the tooling. Hopefully, some of the flows that Haas has built into the tooling, even without the system design applied to it, I think is going to have folks familiar with some of the flows with the system design applied on top of it. Whether it's dissent, being familiar with dissent as opposed to majority vote, whether it's being familiar with uh, you know consensus in the threads and things like this, um, and the bulk of the consensus happening in the prelim phase as a means of streamlining without gridlock. These type of things, I think folks have already had a little bit of experience with. It's in the little bit of testing or a little bit of real use that we've had in these decision-making tools. So there's a little bit of a update, including the document folks are using to apply the system design and the testing with the tooling. So we'll get into that a little bit later, but blockers to this, I can see in the future will be something that Hero discussed in a recent session around some nice documentation of actually getting into the testing, right? So maybe a step-by-step of folks facilitating some of the first meetings that are using this testing. You know, we don't have community reps yet, right? Which is a big part of the system design that's going on top of this tooling. And so until then, we could use some step-by-steps to get folks used to how the facilitation of these meetings can happen. So grateful for Hero for breaking that down, and that'll likely come about with some of the first people who attempt to test this stuff, which likely be some of the folks that have been consistent in these meetings, getting this document together. So yeah, I'll shut up there. Over the next 2 weeks, we'll hopefully see both some testing and some integration of the system design on top of the tooling that we already have. So this is really exciting, to say the least. And maybe we'll get a little bit more into the details of that later. I know, Jason, you're excited to see how this can relate to city coins and how it can plug into some of the journeys tooling that we have, that maybe Aqua can plug us a little bit into what's been going on there today. So I'll shut up and pass it to y'all, whoever wants to do a stand up next. And beautiful to have you guys with us today.
Definitely, man. Great to have you out here too. And I guess since you called me out, I'll come on next. But what's been going on with us, City Coins has actually just gone through a major protocol upgrade, which was voted on by the community through smart contracts and just got deployed. Everything's working great. Really happy with how that turned out. But that was sort of scratching the surface on where we're going with governance, right? And there's a lot of discussions that are starting now about how different cities, municipalities, and things organized around city coins will be able to actually govern and use things like the treasury to approve projects, or other sort of features that are dedicated to the city. So I'm really interested both in the tooling that you guys are doing and just like the bottoms up type thinking that you've brought to the ecosystem so far on this side. And on that note, I'd love to make sure you're at least in the server, aware of the channels or anything else. I mean, we're building the governance for this idea, and I think we've learned a lot from Stacks already, and there's still so much more that could be shared in collaboration as well. But that's it for me. This next 2 weeks, I am just going to be focusing on cleaning up after the mess of our upgrade, but if I'm needed for anything, definitely ping me. And one quick thing I'll throw out there, because I don't have an actual discussion item for it, is we do have a new SIP in the pipeline that's going to be coming up soon. And I believe it's SIP 18. I might have the number wrong, but anyway, it's regarding some of the Stacks 2.1 features may be shipped early. And that's what this SIP would describe and go through. So us as the governance cab will have to review it. And of course, anybody listening to or watching this call, just so you're aware, that is coming up soon. And I'm sure we'll have more discussion as it comes about as well.
That would likely be SIP 15, Jason. But yeah, that's basically what I was going to say as well.
Oh, I took your thunder.
It's all good. I just wanted to make sure it was mentioned sometime in this call.
Amazing. Well, that's it on my end. If anybody else wants to go.
I guess that could be a segue into some of the details of SIP 15. A bit of background. I can just drop a link to some more context in this chat here. We got to talking, and by we meaning like Foundation, Hero, City Coins, Demon Technologies, Exodus Wallet, a lot of and also some exchanges, I believe, had gotten to discussing about what would it, and also trust machines, of course. The conversation started about like, hey, we can't build bridges right now because certain parts of Clarity are currently broken and don't work correctly. Specifically parts that would enable bridges to work in a trustless manner. I just posted the link to the discussion here. And long story short, that conversation evolved into, hey, what if we took what's currently in the next branch of the blockchain, so the code that will eventually become 2.1, which contains these fixes, as well as a whole bunch of other fixes, and let's just release that early. like release that on a cadence of like, once every 9 months or so, once every 10 months, whatever we can reasonably ship. But the point is to get some sort of cadence down. This would both fix the problem at hand, which is get bridges unlocked, but it would do so in a way that's fair to everybody else, because there are other projects in the space that are blocked on things that are in Next. I know that Mechanism, for example, needs some stuff in the Next. I know that some work in Oracle's also is blocked on stuff in Next. There's problems with stacking, like the cooldown period, which are fixed in Next, but again, aren't available right now because it's not released. So what the SIP 15 will propose is take what's in Next at a certain at a certain future date. So not today, but like maybe 4 weeks from now or something. Freeze it and just release that as Stacks 2.1. And then get in the habit from then on out of doing, Stacks 2.2, Stacks 2.3, Stacks 2.4 on a semi-regular basis, so that as people have breaking changes they would like to make to the Stacks blockchain, like maybe one day want to add support for ZK snarks or something like that, or BLS aggregate signatures. These would be breaking changes, but as soon as somebody can get the code ready for that, they can have a reasonable time frame by which it would hit the main network. And having a cadence would achieve that. So the SIP will propose just the upgrade. It won't propose the cadence yet specifically, but it will say like a future SIP will recommend that a cadence will happen. The other governance related aspect to this is the voting mechanism at which it will be ratified. Because one thing that we were trying to do in 2.1 was add a vote to exit smart contract by which we can usher in new breaking changes. That's not going to be ready in time for this. It would probably be ready sometime in July, I'm guessing. So what I propose for this SIP is we would just duplicate SIP 12's upgrade procedure, voting procedure, use that. And then once the vote to exit at block height mechanism lands in the main branch, then we would proceed to sanction that as the official way by which we trigger future upgrades via a cadence. So 2 SIPs coming up. The first SIP describes this potentially sooner than expected breaking change for Stacks 2.1, and the second SIP would ratify the vote to exit at block height smart contract as the official way by which we establish a cadence for releases. That second SIP has not been written yet. We have a partial draft of the first SIP already sitting in the GitHub repository. Okay, that's a lot of information at once, so I'm stopping there.
Thank you kindly, Jude. It's much appreciated, because Jason gave us the warning of how long the SIP coming down the pipeline is. So that summary is much appreciated to make that a little bit more concise for us before we get into it. So thank you kindly, say the least.
Can I
Yeah.
chime in a little bit on the governance side of that?
Sure.
Last time when we voted, I believe it was just if you stake with a pool, and you can go and let them know that your vote is something like that. Is that right? Because I think that's what I did.
Right. So the way that the SIP 12 ratification process worked was we only had the means to measure the votes from stacked stacks from the address that stacked them. So if you stack through a pool, the pool operator would execute the vote, and the set of stacks they were currently stacking at the time they voted would be counted as the vote. What some pools did was they turned around and asked their users, what would you like to do, vote yes or vote no? And they just took their own internal pool-wide vote to decide how to vote with the pool stacks.
Yeah, and I think if I wanted to vote without the pool, I needed to have some Bitcoin, right?
Right. What you would do is you would undelegate your stacks from the pool, and then from there you would be able to vote on your own independently.
Yeah. So I think last time what was, in my opinion, perhaps a little bit missing was the pool. I was able to go to just to go, and I was stacking with, I think, boom. But
Okay.
And what I said is, yeah, of course, I'm in favor of that, but I don't think there was any verification of actually me. I was stacking with it. I could have been a user in the Discord without actually be stacking with them, and I could have told them yes or no, I think they would have taken my vote on face value. So that was maybe specific to Boom, maybe, but I just thought maybe that's a little bit of yeah, if there can be something there can be done to add to a little bit more verification, I think that could be good. But obviously, I understand it depends on the pool itself, how they want to do it.
Yeah, that could be done. We could come up with a way where if a pool wants to vote with their X stacks, whatever value X is, they might have to submit some sort of cryptographic proof, like a signature from each of their users that say, yes, I want the SIP, or no, I don't want the SIP. And then when we go to tabulate the vote itself, we look at how the X stacked in the blockchain, but then we subtract out the votes, the coins that didn't vote, and then we only add to the yes column the votes within that X that voted yes with this off-chain signature, and then the no votes similarly. That could be done. We would need to write the code for it first, though. But it would address the concern you have, which I agree with. Like, how do we know that you're actually stacking with this pool?
Yeah. I'm not saying like we definitely have to do it. I think I'm just letting you know that that's the experience I found last time. Could it be a little bit loophole for those perhaps bad actor that could game the system? But yeah, agree. If there was some better way that doesn't take too much time to come up with, that would be amazing.
Yeah, I can spend some cycles thinking about that and add that to SIP 15. Because it is a good concern. Like, how do we know if a pool chooses to vote on behalf of its users as opposed to just whatever the pool operator decides? Then how do we know that the vote reflects the user's will? It's a good question.
Yeah. Last time I just went into a Discord and say yes. Yeah. Which I was stacking with them at the time.
Right, and if they had a way to just show that you were in fact stacking with them and you voted yes with this many stacks, that could just add strength to the yes vote.
Yeah.
Thank you kindly, Drew, Hero. Getting into a little bit of nuance there, and it seems like it's going to result in some kind of implementation right away. So it's a beautiful thing to have here in these sessions. But yeah, we're still in stand up, so we'll pass it on to folks who have something to share with us. Anybody who has something to share. Thank you kindly, y'all.
All right, well, I'll just come in there then, since you called me out earlier too. So I've been working on a number of things, 3 in particular. One is to follow up on what Jude was talking about. One is another SIP, which is related to the formalization of the Stacks Code of Conduct. So have half a draft on that. And have also been writing on a blog to talk about the SIP process and code of conduct and why it matters. And then in addition to that, working on a legal framework for the work that's being done in governance in the advocates group, and looking at some new issues that have come up in academic writings, which include institutionalism, as well as, and that's something that Primavera de Filippi brings up in her work, which is also brings into light another terminology from her, which is illegal. So that which is not illegal, but isn't specified by the law. And generally lawyers call that a loophole or a gray area. And the idea being that this is really important for blockchain and creating legal frameworks, because there are a lot of gray areas, which can be positive or negative, but in this framework, I think it's positive. It's positive that we can create new things and new ways of of governing organizations and governing the social part, social layer, as Ryder calls it, of the governance, which also can be thought of as I can't even say it, institutionalism, but the dynamic aspect of that, which is the social and cultural part of the blockchain. So just giving you guys a little bit of a framework and idea of what I'm working on. And this also goes down towards exit to community. So the idea of creating organizations within the blockchain, whether they're cooperative organizations or DAOs or what have you, that comply with certain requirements, like tax requirements, but yet are not necessarily a legal entity like a corporation or a person. So some interesting things. Looking forward to sharing everything with you folks as it comes out in the written aspect. So I think that's all I have to share right now. If you have any questions, let me know.
That's all super exciting, Julia. Thank you kindly. And you made me think too, is there may be some dovetailing there with some of the discussion with Jason as he relates to these city coins and the structures of local regional government. So this is I think a very interesting inroad to those discussions, to say the least. Yeah. Thank you kindly.
I just wanted to pile on that. I'm really excited about what they're doing in City Coins and interested to see the creation of their frameworks for relating to the local organizations, for the governance of the financial end of things, and how the community can come in and participate. Not just the local governments, but the actual community, like in Miami, the Miami community, or New York, the New York community. When are you going to get San Francisco, by the way? Anyway, thank you.
Awesome. I appreciate that. And yeah, I think everything's coming soon as we see more community organized and we give them more tools to do so. So, this is a very, very interesting experiment along those lines. And I'll keep it short on that end, but glad that you're seeing what's going on. And definitely, yeah, I'd love to have you guys involved at whatever capacity you have.
This is exciting stuff, y'all. But yeah, we'll keep going. No, Aqua, you're still with us. You're the period. If you have something, or anybody has
Yes, I'm here. I'm listening. Everything. You're talking about so many things, and much of it is new to me. So I'm just listening and learning with you. But yeah,
I have
working.
oh, sorry, Akba.
Yeah.
I had a city coin question. I was hoping to get out before we change topics. But I can also ask a question after Akba checks in. Your event is coming up so soon.
No. Go ahead.
Okay. I hope this is a simple question. But I'm wondering if city coin communities, if we know how they're communicating primarily, like what platforms, and if that's something that's like Stacks. Is that like are they on Stacks platforms? Are they on Slack and Discord, or do we kind of know how those communities organize?
Sure. Yeah. So the quick answer to that is the City Coins Discord is kind of the main area that we keep driving people back to, and where people are organized now. So we have like different groups that you can be a part of for like different initiatives and things to follow along. Excuse me. So Discord would be the best. And then from here, I think we're starting to look at how these DAOs would be formed, how they would communicate, how the balance of power would be, a lot of those little things that come along with a smaller group being able to manage something. So still early, but for right now, Discord is the best place to go.
That is the perfect answer, because that's where our modular consensus tooling is being developed. And so that's like really exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you. Thank you for that question, Ryder. I'm glad you got it in there just to get me hyped. Yeah. But yeah, Aqua, you had something to share with us, right? The pizza day.
So yeah, I'm organizing an event and here in Brazil, in my city, and Haas have been helping me a lot since the beginning. And Hero too was supporting me since the beginning. And yeah, I can show you. I mean, it's not the same thing you're discussing. I mean, GigaBrain stuff is just an event, so not that interesting, but I think I can share this with you. But I cannot share my screen, so I can just send the link, I think. I don't know.
Let me try to make sure you can share. Let me see.
Okay.
Okay, maybe you can try now.
Let me see. Yeah, all good. So yeah. So yeah, this is my event. So it's an ancient factory. It's a here's a boiler. So the name of the place is the Boiler Institute. This is the boiler. It's 22,000 meters square. So it's a huge place. And it just became like the innovation hub of my city. And this is the place where we are going to do the event. And you know, Pizza Day, 2 pizzas, 10,000 Bitcoin. So the same idea, to gather the community and to talk about Bitcoin and crypto. And yes, I need to add Stacks Wallet, of course, here to pay. And these are some persons that are going to speak. So B, it's like the biggest NFT collector of Brazil. She owns over 30 CryptoPunks and 3 apes and a noon, so big person. And she has a startup and a Rise DAO project, which the goal is to onboard women from poor countries to Web3, so artists. And I will discuss with her during my event and with another person that works with her. And maybe we can invite these persons to join Stacks ecosystem. I don't know, because they are not like Ethereum maxis. They just want to onboard artists to Web3. So why not Stacks? You know, we have many artists on Tezos. So maybe I'll be able to onboard some of them for Stacks. We'll see. This girl is a big influencer in Brazil. So like 200,000 followers on Instagram, also some on YouTube. This guy is the host of a podcast with also, I think, 1,000 or 2,000 followers, so a libertarian podcast. Also an entrepreneur, so he knows a lot of businessmen and people building startups. This is a guy from my city. So he created a big company, Arthur Mining, which is focused on ESG mining, let's say. And he also wrote a book, The Future of the Money, about Bitcoin, with over, I think, 50,000 copies or 60,000 copies sold, something like this. This is Mark, you know Mark. I don't need to explain who is Mark, but Mark is the creator of Megapont and some other projects. He's going to talk with us. This is Sarah Satoshi, I think you know her too. And yes, there are also some other persons that I'm going to insert here. They're not, the website is not ready yet, but yeah, that's the plan right now. That's the goal. And I'm also inviting Daniel, which is like a big influencer from Ethereum. So he's going to talk with us about Web3 and the future of domains. And yeah, that's the current plan for the event. We have like a little Instagram page where you can follow some updates. I mean, we have Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Discord, I mean, everything. And yeah, we're ready to go. We're start doing the marketing today, I think, sending emails and stuff. And we're expecting 300 persons because we're going to have 3 different stages. So 2 main stages and a little room. So Bitcoin basics, it's going to be for like 200 persons in the main like displays. And in the secondary stage, I'm going to talk about NFTs, and we can have 100 persons there. And in a separated room, we can also have like 20 persons. And I think we'll talk about like being an entrepreneur in crypto. So maybe Jamil will talk with us. A guy from my city, the founder of Pag Crypto, so a company to do payments, fiat and crypto payments. And yeah, some other companies that maybe will join us and share their experience about, building in crypto. So yeah, it's been pretty crazy because from the idea to the event, I had only 6 weeks. So yeah, it's a nightmare. It is exciting, but it is also a nightmare because to organize all of this in 6 weeks it's very complicated, but I think we'll make it. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Akba, I have a question. Not to
Yes.
stress you out or anything.
No,
but
go ahead.
yeah, I'm just curious about are there translators? Are people going to be speaking in several different languages and translated, or how's that going to work?
Yes. By the way, I need to talk with the enterprise. I have a message to reply, but yes, we're supposed to have a translator translating from Portuguese to English. So that's the current plan because I mean, I pay a lot of money for the infrastructure. So, the cameras and the live streaming stuff is more expensive, much more expensive than the place itself. Because I mean, it's going to be on YouTube, high quality and stuff. So yeah, and yes, I will hire a translator. So my conferences about NFTs are going to be in Portuguese, even if those speaking are not from Brazil, right? Because they speak Portuguese. So B speak Portuguese, even she's in Europe. Daniel, same thing. Even if he lives in USA, he speaks Portuguese. And but I need to see how many translators I'll have because they told me they need 2 translators because it's like 6-hour event, and I don't know if they get tired or whatever, but they told me I need 2, and I say okay. And I don't know which trail, let's say, I will live stream, if NFTs or just like Bitcoin. I really don't know. And I need to talk with the person with the camera and all the equipment because, I mean, I don't have time to do everything at the same time. We're still like talking to the speakers and to be sure they will attend. But yes, I mean, I have 2 weeks to do all of this, but the plan is, yes, to have a translator and to have like a link on YouTube for everyone interested in listening.
That's a lot of work for one person. I agree. I don't know who you know, but I bet there's a lot of people who would want to help you. I bet Stacks Due Diligence, there might be people there.
Yeah,
but
I'm there.
they need to speak Portuguese. Oh, I know you're there. I'm just saying,
yeah,
I don't know how much help you've asked for. That's all
I mean, okay, the person's there. Yes, definitely. Yeah, but I mean, for translating, it's like a pro job, with a micro and live, at the same time, the speaker it's talking, the person is translating. So just like a professional stuff. I mean, there is a company, Traduzca, and it's like 2 minutes from my home. So I just went there the other day and I need to talk again with the guy to be sure everything is okay. And yeah, I just sent an email to Adam today, like 2 a.m. answering some questions he sent me because I think they will support me somehow, because until like yesterday, Haas was funding everything, Haas itself, which is amazing. I still don't understand why he's such a nice guy. One day I will, but I'm very, very thankful. I mean, this is only happening because of Haas, 100%. I would never do this if it was not Haas, And right now, so like, looks like Stacks Foundation is interested in helping. So it would be awesome. I mean, we won't use the money, we just refund Haas. But yeah, it's great. It's just great. Many persons are helping me. So Gamma is also helping me. Mark from Megapond. I mean, everyone is helping me somehow, and this is really awesome if you think about it. Feels really like a community, you know, not just because I really have the feeling that we say community, 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 and it's just like words, you know. I really feel this in crypto as a whole. NFT community. What community? I mean, we just have JPEGs, we pump the price, and what is our community about, right? And right now, I can feel the community. I can feel, you know, people helping me and doing something for me, right? I always help everyone when I can, and now the help it's coming back, you know, karmas, some say. So yeah, it's pretty amazing, but I really think it's pretty much a buzz world right now, you know, community and metaverse and Web3. I mean, of course, we're just getting started, but I really think it's not real, you know. We're doing our best, of course, to build a real community, but I mean, we have a long way to go, right? To have a real community, a real feeling, you know, of a family, of a group of friends. I don't know how to explain, but I am part of many communities, and I don't feel that I'm really part of it, you know. I just have an NFT. I cannot say this is a community, you know. And right now I can really say I have the Stacks community backing me, you know, and this is amazing. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much. It's really awesome to hear you talk about it.
Yeah, it is. It is, to say the least. You know, I think that felt access to commons in the advocates, right? Whether that's support, monetary, you know, compensation support, but you know, horizontal access, right, to having your voice heard, getting things done without so much bureaucracy in between is a big part of the system design, and I think Haas really embodies that from an individual scale as well. And you know, I know he, along with all of us, are really, really, you know, just amazed by, you know, some of what you've already been able to do with what we hope is this, like you're saying, felt access to what's going on in advocates in the Stacks ecosystem. And I know, you know, some of the journeys tooling that Haas has been working on is very much a means to make experiences like yours all that more built in and automatic, right, and felt. So thank you kindly for articulating it in that way. But yeah, we're still in stand-ups. These are probably the longest stand-ups we've ever had, but they've been beautiful. So we'll continue. I don't know if anybody else has some brief stand-ups for us before we get on.
I kind of dabble in everything, and so I'll just say the piece I want to say right now, which is for anyone who hasn't been tracking journeys at the Advocates DAO. Akva's Pizza Day is technically the first one, and you heard from him. Everyone just heard from him, and it was like mind blowing. Because I agree too with I come from community organizing in meat space, and it's and something's missing in these internet spaces. So that really spoke to me, Akva. I'm really glad that you talked about that. But yeah, I put a couple blog posts in the chat, and if you look at that, the featured one is about journeys. It's a 2-minute read, so if you want to just kind of catch up with what's being thought of there, and what Harold said, I just want to reiterate, it's really making like that community felt thing automatic. It's not replacing us with bots. It's just like, how do we make this the norm, that we're reaching for each other and getting each other the resources we need from the collective pot we already have. So that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Yeah, I know we have Merrick with us. Fred, I don't know how much you guys want to share with us, but you can if you want to. You can pass if you want to as well.
Yeah, I'll pass. Thank you.
Okay, beautiful to have you with us, man. But yeah, we usually go through some of these labels here and walk us through some things. I know we have Jude and Juliet here with us. So maybe it's a good time to go through this, any foundation updates in general that you guys may have for us, in addition to the ones you guys have already given us. I don't know if there's any goings on your side of things, but I'll leave the floor open.
We really need to start getting Jenny on these calls.
Yeah. I think she may fall back into them soon. Hopefully, it'd be a beautiful thing. But yeah, this is something that we usually go over just for folks that may be new here. I know we have Atkwa here, and Juliet, we usually rely on your insights here as well, or appreciate them anyway. Is there anything you'd like to give us here on this post? We've had.
I think that we're still at the same place as we were before, with that concept of having a community member on the board. It's been spoken to several times with respect to the requirements for the position. There's both fiduciary requirements as well as insurance requirements, and then obviously a due diligence process that has to be done by the Stacks Foundation. And so I think that unless we get a group together in the advocates, getting people like maybe Hero might be interested in creating a working group or something for this. I think it's going to sit here until we push it forward, if that's what the will of the community wants, if the community is interested in this. So I'm just going to leave that out there for a discussion. So maybe others can add their thoughts in about this particular item.
We have Ryder, the hand up, if it was on purpose.
Yeah, also Hero, if you have something first, I'd love to hear you on this first.
I don't know about this very well, the context of this particular thing. I've heard it a couple of times, but my only thought regarding the will of the community, maybe Julia touched on this. I'm just personally very keen to help get the will of the people into these, to let the people say the call, not like the call, but the sort of foundation side, like here, no, because I think like I'm quite keen to help collect those, what people want, maybe, so to speak. But currently there isn't a method. It's a little bit like and because I was in the other day in the development meeting with Jude, where Jude hosts the development meeting, and I feel like Jude was doing an amazing job at advocating for sort of the decentralization of wanting to get to let people understand the SIP and have a social consensus, or more like that than having all the decision stay with the devs. So I thought that was super interesting, and I really think that's an amazing thing. I'm just very interested in that side of things to help get the Stacks community understand these like core devs development stuff affects everybody. Maybe the stuff here on the screen, but maybe it's the SIP. I do, because I follow the Bitcoin bit very closely, and I'm learning how the process is as I go as well this time. And I've learned a lot, and I hope Bitcoin can be close to, like, Stacks can reach almost that's the goal, that's the benchmark where we can, when we have BIPs and SIPs, we can increase the level of decentralization and the social consensus in order to make changes to the protocol. Obviously, at the beginning, it'll be harder and maybe more centralized, but it's okay. But if we trend towards the direction of the decentralization, I think personally, that's what I'm very keen to help with. I don't know if Jude has any thought about that.
No, you said it really well.
Yeah,
I mean, so maybe the biggest difference I think between us and Bitcoin is that we, I mentioned, and I kind of touched on this earlier, is that before Stacks 2.0 launched, really since the conception of Blockstack itself, we had kind of fallen into a cadence of doing hard forks just as a way to bring new features to the system. And one of the reasons for introducing the Stacks token to that system in the first place was that we wanted to get out of the business of having the developers basically dictate what breaking changes got into the system and what didn't. There's a forum post from Munib, like way back in the day, where he describes the act of holding the Stacks token really ought to be the act of deciding which features get into which network upgrades and which ones do not, thereby empowering the community to collectively agree on this. That line of thought, that there can be hard forks, I don't think would fly very well in the Bitcoin community. Bitcoin developers do a very good job at making sure that hard forks never happen, because I mean, it's honestly like an engineering marvel, like the tricks they managed to pull with SegWit and Taproot and such. We can certainly, so I mean, one thing I expect from the governance CAV is y'all are more than free to push back on things that the developers come up with. Like if y'all don't want a hard fork cadence, you can say no, and there's not much we can do about it for the SIP process. Or you could require that certain changes be executed as soft forks. Totally fine, again, if you want to do that, that's the governance CAV is empowered to make these decisions. But that said, though, the reason why I'd said that should be a SIP, like getting into a cadence, like I do expect pushback, because it's not a universally held truth that hard forks should happen in blockchains, or that they should happen with any sort of regularity or cadence. We're on the same page, I'm trying to say.
Yeah, definitely. And I started creating a channel in my Discord to discuss the BIPs and the SIPs. I'm just trying to figure out a way to get the community care about this a little bit more.
Yeah, I agree. That's always that's always like the ever-present challenge, right? I know that, so I mean, like, I guess it really depends on like who's the stakeholders. I'd imagine that like a lot of users don't care too much about technical upgrades as long as they don't break anything. Because all it's doing is just adding functionality, and that's certainly one category of breaking change. And perhaps that can have a lower threshold to acceptance because most people can be assumed to not care or something like that. But that falls under the governance CAV's purview to decide. Breaking changes that do things like change the token emission schedule, on the other hand, or change the way that stacking works in a way that makes it less accessible, like that might be way more controversial. It might require a lot more users to have to show that they care to want such a change. We're really in uncharted territory here, so we kind of have to play it by ear and try to figure out what the community wants. But just as long as we're talking to the community and we're setting reasonable, we're just reasonable about it. Like we say, oh, well, change A affects very few people, but change B affects a whole lot of people. Therefore, change A might require fewer ratification constraints than change B, like things like that.
Yeah.
What I was gonna say was just with regards to just like having an active issue and hearing what's being talked about. What I was going to say and what still kind of makes sense is that there's a due diligence server that Hero made, and it feels like it kind of serves this purpose. It's not a board member, it's not legally serving this purpose, but I love that there's actually a server, there's like a community that represents this position in a lot of ways that has emerged organically. And that's kind of just all I wanted to say. And then to hear like that this emergent topic that was happening right now was, that hero just created a channel for it in that server. So as far as this issue goes, I don't know if we need to touch back to it unless we find a reason to, like, we're like, oh wait, what's the benefit of this for community members that they're not already getting with the due diligence server?
Can I just add some context to that? I think to answer your question, Ryder, I think the one benefit is having a community voice on the board. At least that was the context of this particular issue for the last couple of years, was the idea of having someone, maybe someone like a Friedger or a Dan or what have you, who would represent the community interests. And we have now a much bigger community, a community that consists of miners, consists of people in NFT projects, consists of many different of DAOs and educational issues and artists. So we have a much larger community. So maybe we need to revisit and look at this a little bit and think, is this something that we need to continue to bring up? Or is this something that community members care about? So I think you have a point, Ryder, about this particular issue. And maybe this is something we should think about a little bit and talk to other members of the ecosystem. And I do love the due diligence server and the things that Hero has created there for community to discuss the new breaking changes on the SIPs.
Yeah, you guys got me thinking too. Particularly, knowing Heroes with this consistently, weekly in advocates, and really tuned into what we're doing with trying to ensure that what Akva, articulated to us earlier is built in, right? Into the governance tooling and the system design organization. And, Hero, I know, that you have a fairly good grasp on, some of these functional mechanisms of autonomy, right? Whether that's autonomy and access to some of the things Akbar was talking about, or, access to voice and decision-making, right? And how it's beyond, lip service or thinking seriously about this stuff. So, what, yourself and Jude, it sounded like you guys were talking about to me, right, is it goes a little bit beyond just merely decentralization, and it goes into distributed power that goes along with that decentralization, which can be set in motion, right? But I think you have a little bit of insight, Hero, and of course those of you with us here today, of how that tooling can engender folks coming together around certain issues. It is built with the understanding that everybody is interested in governance, but whenever there is an instance when somebody needs to have their voices heard, right, the tooling really makes that feel tangible, right, to Aqua's point. And so it's also in the context of the micro DAO tooling that Haas has built out for journeys, right? And some of the points that you were just mentioning, Juliet, and briefly we've discussed, right, in terms of this position, being able to be a DAO of some kind, right? You match that with some of the things that was just mentioned about the tooling, and I think we could have an interesting, emergent, type of innovation when it comes to this kind of position. And Juliet, I know of some of the legal frameworks we've been following from Primavera di Filippi that may lend themselves to this. So this is exciting, just to know that folks like yourself, Hero, and other folks here on this call can really make things go in this direction. So it's just my 2 cents or thinking on it so far. But thank you kindly, y'all, for going so deep into this. But yeah, the floor open if there's anything else on this before we go on.
So we're at the top of the hour, but I'm just kind of curious what kind of time people have, in case we could just do Runa's piece about the decreasing number of minors, but I also respect people's time and understand if we want to end on time.
Yeah, this was very long stand-ups. Welcome, Haas. Beautiful to have you, man. I don't know if you can hear us yet, but we essentially just got out of stand-ups and got into a little bit of the board rep position that we usually go over and get into a little bit deeper. And we'll move along here, but it's beautiful to have you, man. I don't know if you have any updates for us or if you want to pass, but we try to touch on all the goings on with the tooling and some of the work we've been doing with the community to get some more testing with the tooling with the system design attached. But yeah, I'll continue over into these action items. I know, Haj, you had a good discussion item too in terms of an advocate's pivot that hopefully we can touch on too. I know these are some things that we've touched on before. Jason, working on a theme for us. I know maybe you may not want to get into that for the nth time. And we touched a little bit on SIPs throughout this session. Maybe we can get into a little bit here again. I know Jenny will be a big help to us here, but I know we can push things along ourselves too. It also reminds me of something while we have Jude and Juliet here together. Jude, I know I know Jude actually mentioned that there's a capacity to add new SIP types. So I don't know if Jude, you wanted to go in a little bit for that for Juliet, because this is maybe something relevant for some of the work she's been trying to do with the code of conduct. Or Juliet, you can tell us you're already aware of that or what have you, but maybe this is something to touch on a little bit before we move on to some other things.
Sure. The process of making a new SIP consideration advisory board is really straightforward. You just form a working group, and then once you have everyone in there who wants to be in there, you just send a pull request to the SIPs repository that just contains a very small SIP. All it is just like, we're creating this new consideration advisory board. Here's what here's what the CAB will cover. Here's what it will not cover that might be related, and here's how you can reach us.
Yeah,
is there a video? Sorry, is there a video somewhere on that, Jude? Just like a short explanatory video?
There really should be, but there isn't. It's just the SIP 000 document that describes this.
Ryder, I can help you. Well, I can talk you through about that because I did it. I went through the process of requesting to be on one of those things, and Jude kindly added me in, so I know how it goes.
Yeah, that's awesome, and it'd be good. Maybe you and I can make a little video just to start, like a little Loom or something.
Yeah, let me know if you guys want to do that as well. I have kind of written down how we did the initial one for the governance CAB, as well as like what our first meeting looked like. I had just thrown some of those links out too, so I can copy them over to you, Ryder.
And Haj, you missed Akbar give us a beautiful presentation on what's been going on with the pizza day, and a whole lot of gratitude to yourself. I just don't want to forget that, and some really good feedback, right? To some felt access to Stack's community and some real community, to put it in Akbar's words, right? Not just lip service to community. So we felt like you're definitely an embodiment of what we're trying to achieve in advocates in that way. But it's beautiful to have you with us, man.
Who's that dot person?
That's Akbar.
It's me.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a pleasure to have you guys all with us. And I'll make sure to get the recording to you, Ha, so you can see all the kind words Akbar gave to yourself and to his experience so far. But we have the request for code of conduct, the SACS code of conduct here that I know you've touched on a few times for us, and we can iterate on with the tooling. I know we discussed this before in these sessions, and now we can actually use the clan system design, right, to help us engender some community feedback to some of the points earlier from Hero and Jude about just getting folks, considering these important things. I don't know if you want to speak on any more of that, Juliet, but yeah.
I talked about it in my stand-up. So about the SIP that's it's half drafted. So there is one thing that I have a question with Jude as to the types of SIPs. There are particular SIPs, and I wondered, can there be a governance or type of SIP or another type of SIP? I know the one that I selected for the code of conduct was the one that means that nobody has to really do anything. There's no changes to code. There's no changes to any development. There's no change. But I kind of felt like that really didn't speak to the code of conduct because you have to conform to a code of conduct. So I wondered if you had some response to that.
Sure. So there's a difference between the SIP format, which is the way in which the document is structured, and the SIP considerations, which is where the SIP is applied in the ecosystem. All SIPs have the same format, like they have the same preamble, the same abstract, introduction, related work, activation, all that stuff. And that's all in SIP 000. It's there's not very much to the format. The consideration, I think, is what you are speaking to here, and that is like, does this SIP affect the governance of the ecosystem, or does this SIP affect the ethics of the ecosystem or the diversity of the ecosystem? Like just because a SIP isn't technical consideration doesn't mean that it doesn't have staying power. For example, if we ratified a SIP that formalized a code of conduct, that SIP that does that could have the power, for example, to amend to SIP 000 itself to say that, like, SIP 000 all applies, and this code of conduct also applies to any of the official business taken out by individuals participating as officers in the SIP process, something to that effect. Like the governance mechanisms of the SIP process are themselves also SIPs, and they don't have to talk about any code at all. They can talk about really anything that affects the ecosystem. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. That actually gave me even more insight and additional ideas. So thank you very much.
No problem.
Welcome, D-List. These sessions are open, so you're in the right place if you're looking for some governance discussion. And we're kind of towards the end of the session, maybe, and in the weeds a little bit, but you're welcome to chime in and give us an introduction to yourself if you'd like. Yeah, we'll be continuing to work through some of these things here. But yeah, welcome. Yeah, this is the only update that I have for the decision-making things. It's a document here for folks to look at in terms of how folks can pick up the tooling we have and apply system design that we've been thinking seriously about from the direct dialogue with the Longhouse or Indigenous Council that we're working with. I think really, tapping into where really are these precursors to democratic structures, right? Really tapping into the distributed power of these indigenous systems that really inspired some of those first, some of the more democratic structures that we're familiar with that have limits to the function, right? Largely because of the lack of indigenous protocols intact, right? To what inspired federalism, what inspired certain three-tiered means of organization. And so we're getting back to this in a very real way with some of this incorporation of this design into the tooling to really encourage distributed power that I think folks were speaking to earlier today, to say the least. So I encourage folks to look at this, particularly Jason, that have been following up with this thread. I don't know if Jason is still with us. Oh, he is. Beautiful. But yes. Yeah. We'll probably be adding to this stuff, and like I said earlier in the stand-up, Heroes had some good ideas of some tangible things to add, particularly before we have any explicit representation of these clans, which be a huge milestone for us going forward. But yeah, I encourage folks to get into this. It is an action item, so we'd like to be reaching out to you yourself, Jason, and other folks as much as possible if you're involved in advocates already, as you are, Jason, to help you, to get us some help testing this incorporation of the system design with the tooling. We already have some good testing of the tooling by itself, standing alone. And I think Haas has done a remarkable job of building in things that will get people familiar to what goes on in this use of the tooling. So, but yeah, Haas, you haven't had a stand up for us. I know that you may have something for us as it relates to journeys or some of this tooling stuff, but you can pass as well. But I want to make sure we get your voice in here before we get too far gone in the meeting.
Nope, nothing.
All right, good. All right, but yeah, I'll move on from there. I don't know if there's any questions, comments of how to get involved with this, but yeah, we'll move on. I know there was some important discussion. Both Haas had an advocates pivot discussion that I don't think we've gotten to, besides some discussion here in the thread. Haas, do you want to speak to this in any way? Have you been thinking about this any more, right, in terms of getting some more people in general into the advocates and getting it a little bit more outward facing?
I think it stands as it is. Like I'm just like putting this here. I think there's like some work as it relates to community outreach, and also structuring like what advocates means, what it does. The current efforts with journeys were the community, or the access to community commons, or access to like grants stacks happens through a very formal process. Having journeys in place as a trustful process might replace the way we treat grants with something more informal, more community consensus oriented. Of course, I'm not saying that this is like the golden solution. Of course, it's going to take a lot of work, a lot of structuring. If we have trustful circles within the community, that means that we can have significant, I think, micro and macro decision-making levels across the ecosystem. This means that this would require some format and some formalization. And I think having like simple formalized structures, such as everyone having a BNS name that's verifiable, and working from that to something that might resemble like soulbound tokens for these BNS names, staying away from KYC as much as possible, and then using that reputation maybe down in the research that are attested by other people in the community. Having that vision of regenerative, at least intrinsic commons when it comes to people testing for each other, might make it a better and more decentralized method of having access to commons. I think we have right now multiple points of access, but I think we can through multiple, through having everyone, you know, use a like a format for identity might help with other factors informing the kind of community or society.
Well, thank you kindly, Mai. I think it's beautiful insights into how you're thinking about these things and the type of healthy growth that you're thinking about, right? Not just growth, period, right? And I think you have put in a brilliant work to try to build this in as much as possible, ensure that it scales if folks do start coming in. And I think the system design is going to be extremely important to that we're trying to layer on top now. So this is a thing, to say the least. Let me see.
Nobody that I know.
Let me see. Okay. But yeah, make sure everybody's muted. Welcome. Oh boy. I muted you, but you're welcome to speak and introduce yourself if you'd like to. We're just inside of a meeting here, but yeah, we can continue. If there's anything here, I know you were thinking some serious thoughts here as in the way of growth. I don't if you had any expansions on these thoughts.
Who are you talking to, Harold?
Hero, is Hero here? Yeah. I see this as Hero's comment, right? So I was just wondering if, I know nobody's responded here, but I was reading a little bit as you were speaking, Haas, and it looks like Hero's thinking of some concrete steps forward, and wondering if you wanted to expand on that a little bit before we move on. But I also wanted to say, Haas, that what you were speaking to is a little bit what I tried to speak to as well after Aqua's share, and it's a beautiful thing to incorporate into this growth conversation, a pivot conversation here. But yeah, Hero, I was talking to you. If you're available, or if you wanted to say anything, of course.
Oh, give me a sec. I just was asking to that thread, what does the definition of all community members mean? I think whether we do it step by step. I think it was essence of the question. It wasn't a statement. It was more of a discussion point.
Yeah, I think these are good places to start, right, in terms of exactly what this pivot is going to consider, and yeah, I'm looking forward to whatever strategies we come up with. I do really appreciate your mapping of the community, right? That general word that Aqua mentioned earlier can be used in a lot of ways. So I think it'll be really important to the process of how we do this. So.
Yeah, I think because a lot of you OGs probably been there for a long time, and I think since last year and since I came in, like there's a lot of random, not random, but a lot of like user and communities sprung up, which is like dotted all over the ecosystem, who I'm with interacting every day. So I think those are communities too. In addition to the devs and the builders, they are more like stakeholders, maybe, if you want to think of it that way. But they are also part of Stack's community. So I just don't want to leave them out of some of the interpretations that when we speak about community.
Yeah, these are the type of considerations that I'm banking on you for as we think about this stuff going forward. Because yeah, I think it's interesting. That mapping is interesting for a lot of reasons, right? Alignment, bridge work, right? and just what we can do with it. So thank you kindly. But yeah, I'm glad we got to this a little bit. Another important one that I think comes from Runa in the Discord. And it looks like we had a little bit of conversation back from you, Hero. Thank you kindly. But I think the essence of this was some growing concern in the community. Multiple community members, Runa mentions, speaking on the concentration of minors or lack of minors. And he was asking some interesting questions about how we might engender considering incorporating mining as a priority in grants efforts or other efforts in the ecosystem. So yeah, I want to get some dialogue on this from folks. And I think there's some overlap with what there may be overlap with city coins here in some ways, but also to journeys, right? In terms of community, carved community paths for ideation and implementation of projects that the community thinks are important. And I think this is a fundamental one, right? That folks might find important across the board. So changing the shape of how it looks could be something that comes out of journeys. Something that Runa, I think, alludes to in this short questions and statements here. But yeah, I'll open up the floor and see if there's anything that comes to mind for folks. I know, Hero, you've already gotten down a little bit here.
Yeah, Hero's assessment's accurate. The fundamental problem with number of miners is that from first principles, you're reasoning about inputs and outputs here. So there's only a fixed amount of Bitcoin going in, and there's only a fixed amount of stacks coming out. More specifically, the amount of stacks coming out is the fixed parameter here, right? Because there's 1,000 stacks per stacks block plus some transaction fees. And those stacks have at any given point in time, those stacks have a certain price. Like right now, I think it's like 52 cents or something like that with the current crypto fiasco going on. But be that as it may, that gives you a budget for all of the miners to share for trying to mine a stacks block. There will never be a case where there's more Bitcoin going into mining a stacks block than stacks coming out. Or rather, if that does happen, it's economically irrational behavior that is not going to be sustained. That puts a hard limit on the number of independent miners that can ever exist on the network, because sending a block commit transaction on the Bitcoin chain is not free. You have to pay a transaction fee, and you have to pay the minimum amount of dust outputs to the POX outputs. So what that means is that even if every single miner paid the smallest amount of money for their Bitcoin transaction fees and their POX outputs, that number is not zero. So you can just calculate the maximum number of miners the system can support by simply dividing the worth of the stacks by the minimum price of the Bitcoin transaction to get the total number of block commit transactions that could theoretically ever exist per block. And that number is not very big. I think when we had the system evaluated by, I want to say the name was Prism Group. They're an economic auditor group. We had this done before the system launched and the foundation, just to make sure that miners would show up at all. And it turns out they would, but they had the same realization that I just said, which is that the price of the stacks token relative to the minimum price per transaction is what's going to tell you the maximum number of miners that will ever exist in the system. And right now, that number is the number of miners we have right now. Like, it fluctuates between like 6 and 9, and that's about what it should be with the current parameters. If it were the case that stacks doubled in price without Bitcoin changing, then we could support more miners, because you can now support that many more minimal block commit transactions. Similarly, if the price of stacks decreased considerably, then miners would drop out. But that latter case is not surprisingly not a problem, because if it is the case that nobody mines in a Bitcoin block, then the next person that mines gets to claim all of the previous Bitcoin blocks stacks Coinbases. So as long as the stacks token is worth something, then eventually it will become profitable to mine, even if it's not every Bitcoin block. So that's not worrisome at all right there. The system will remain live under even those extreme situations. But what that says, though, is that we have this optics problem, which is this folks here at Avox DAO aren't even the first persons to mention. Like it's a pretty broadly known problem. Right now, the Stacks blockchain has like 7 miners. Why isn't it more? There's a couple things we're doing right now to address that. Some of which are actually happening in this proposed upgrade, SIP 15. If you consider the number of miners to be a proxy for the number of independent points of control over the state of the blockchain, then there's 2 observations one could make here. The first observation, which I think should like make people feel a bit better about the situation, is that the real question for how decentralized is the blockchain isn't the number of miners, it's what is the minimum number of miners that can take control of over half of the mining power. And right now that number is 3, but it's also 3 for Ethereum, and no one complains about Ethereum. So the number of miners is really a red herring. The real question is, what is the minimum set of miners that could take control of the system? And that number, I mean, 3 isn't great. Like I'm not trying to whitewash that in any way, shape, or form, but I am saying that like if we believe that Ethereum is stable right now, then we must also necessarily believe that Stacks is stable in the same way. The second point I want to make is that miners, the notion of the word miner, I think is a bit overly constrained right now in the history of blockchains, because in the history of blockchains, a miner is an entity that spends energy to produce blocks by means of having and by means of acquiring through capital expenditures things like ASICs and GPUs to keep trying to produce blocks. In our system, it's a little bit different because you're not acquiring physical capital like that. You're spending Bitcoin, which is a lot more accessible to the world, and you're not tied to the constraints imposed upon us by the world of atoms. So what that means, though, is that we can kind of decouple in our minds the entities that make decisions of what transactions get mined versus the entities that spend Bitcoins. Because unlike in the world of atoms, it's easy to separate these things in the world of bits. So that brings me to the second point, which is in Stacks 2.1, we're trying to make it so that it should be possible to build decentralized mining pools with no custodian in the Stacks blockchain. And it should be possible for each of the pool participants to be distinguishable in the system. So if 100 people got together to become a single miner on the Bitcoin chain, the mining software can be written such that those 100 individuals must individually vote for the block they are trying to mine, thereby creating, if you want a BFT majority, 67 points of control within the system. So what I think will happen going forward is once this upgrade goes through that enables decentralized mining pools, chain explorers for Stacks can start to consider individual pool entities within the pool as separate miners, because they do individually exercise decision-making power that an otherwise independent miner would make. It's just that the transactions they send don't necessarily correlate to the number of decision-making entities in the system. This is true to a first approximation for things like Bitcoin. Like if you mine in a Bitcoin mining pool, you are helping to make decisions. I say to a first approximation because it's not quite the same. In Bitcoin mining pools, you are contributing hash power to a custodian that's choosing the transactions. You don't really have much of a say in those transactions. You just receive some reward. But the stuff that Demon Technologies is working on right now is making it so you both have a share in the reward and you have a say in what transactions get into the block, which gives you the full decision-making powers of a miner without having to incur this extra capital expenditure of having to send a Bitcoin transaction. Like there's no reason why, 10 years from now, we couldn't put all of the miners in the entire Stacks blockchain behind a single Bitcoin address. It could be done. I mean, it wouldn't be, it would certainly require a lot of code to be written, but it could be done. But the point is we should be trying to maximize the number of independent points of control in the system without having to worry too much about the number of the current price of tokens relative to one another and relative to the United States dollar, or however you want to dominate your cryptocurrency. So we're working on this problem in the second phase, and we're working on solutions for the problem in the second point that I made here. And for the first point, we need to change the conversation. We being, the cryptocurrency community, not just Stacks, but we need to change the conversation about number of miners being a proxy for number of decision-making entities, because it's really not. Like, it's not good that Stacks has 3 miners that control over half the hash power. It's not good that Ethereum similarly has 3 miners. And it's also not good that 45% of Bitcoin's hash power is unknown. For all we know, it's the same person. And that would be scary if true. So we're taking steps to actually try to solve the problem for first principles, which is make it so that there are more there are more independent points of control for the Stacks blockchain's chain history.
Jude, may I ask a question?
Sure.
What about the node runner? You know, like in Bitcoin, like the node runner also have a say in validating the miners transactions. What's the equivalent in Stacks?
The same thing.
Yeah.
Hasn't happened yet, but it is entirely possible to run a user-activated soft fork in Stacks.
Right.
So what that is, so if y'all were around when Bitcoin did the SegWit upgrade, what ultimately forced the miners' hands was users themselves downloaded and ran node software, such that if miners did not vote to activate SegWit in the blocks they produced, then their blocks would never even be considered as valid. That's still a soft fork because you're just constraining the set of rules for what it means to be a valid block as opposed to trying to add new rules. But what it did is it made it so that miners could either upgrade to SegWit, or they could risk having their blocks be orphaned on the chain, and thereby making it so all the energy they spent making them could never be redeemed for money. So this could be done in Stacks too. Like Stacks is a forkable blockchain, so users could choose to force miners' hands here by running nodes that would not relay blocks that had the properties they didn't desire. Like suppose we had something kind of like SegWit happen in Stacks, like moving signature aggregation off the chain or something like that. Like that could we could force miners' hands that way by running nodes. Like if exchanges got on board with that too, then what that would mean is the people who actually value the Stacks token would be forcing the miners' hands, because the miners could choose between being stubborn and obstinate and losing money, or going along with what the users want and continuing to make money.
Yeah, I think that sounds like amazing goal to have, definitely, because I'm more like a Bitcoiner, and I'm thinking like through learning the SIP process, I learned a lot. And today I was listening to the podcast as well, like about the dynamic between all these three parties of miners and you know, just an average user who don't run nodes, but also people who run nodes. But yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, if you run a node, you are helping make decisions in the network. And if it is the case that, I don't know, miners decide to be obstinate about something, then users could easily overpower them if they can be, you know, organized to all run the node software that has the additional relay rules that prevent miners' blocks, like not that prevent obstinate miners' blocks from getting added to the main chain.
Is that currently possible? I mean, is that gonna be possible with this new upgrade, or is it maybe the next in the future upgrades?
Oh, you could do it right now. It's like adding the ability for you to, I don't know, like have a program run on each block that says, yes, accept this, or no, don't accept this. Like that could be added in right now. That's not a breaking change to the system.
Cool.
Jude and Hero, this does make at least myself feel a lot better, to say the least, to know at least the red herring part, and also the work, the changes that are work in progress, right, that are trying to address, like you're saying, some of the fundamentals of the problem. And no, so thank you kindly. I'll be able to include this recording, hopefully, for Runa into this thread. And you have a really robust answer to include here. So thank you kindly, y'all. And yeah, well, I think, you know, these are some of the other things we've touched on before. I think we're going to need Philip for this. I'm really excited about what Journeys has to offer for this. And, you know, a lot of the other tooling that we've talked about in this session and previous sessions. And I think we really need Philip's voice to come in on this, get some feedback into how he feels about some of the ways forward. But yeah, I'll leave the floor open if anybody else has had any thoughts on this. I don't think we've had much discussion on it yet, just because we're going to need Philip to clarify some things, it seems like. But we'll continue through here. And I think I think what's happening in decision-making tooling is pretty much the updates for the governance lab stuff. Maybe we leave this open for other reasons. I think we've talked many times in Bounty's issue here in the thread about incorporating some of the Journeys tooling, right? And Journeys is really our systems design or bottom-up approach to Brownies, right? And so I think we've discussed a lot of that today. And this is more of just Jason's ever-growing work and cleaning up the repo and making sure everything is nice and tight for us. There's very minimal updates here in regards to how we're connecting the Indigenous efforts and some of the education-focused things on Indigenous modes to governance models and the tooling that we're building here. I think some of the next inroads on this will be some sessions with folks guiding us on some of the digital fabrication training and things like this, which we're excited about, but still have to have some time, I think, before we can have some updates here for you guys. And the rest of this stuff is, I think, a lot of backlog. The Fireside Chat series is, I think, flared up a little bit and then fizzled out a little bit. With some of the sessions getting a little bit more specific than just broader advocates or stacks discussions. So looking forward to sparking that back up again too. But I'll leave the floor open for any things lingering on folks' minds. I'm really happy. I think this is one of our longest sessions ever. And I think it's just because there's so much to share and exciting stuff to collaborate on. So it's a beautiful thing to have you guys with us. It's felt really productive from many angles. And yeah, I'll leave the floor open before we close. Thank you, guys. All right. You guys have a beautiful day. It's been beautiful to see you, hear your voices. Stop the recording.